What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 7 fantasy wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. Shoot us your questions there too. We'll do our best to answer them. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get access to exclusive content. All those details in the description. But for now, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdowns, I want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. And I specifically want to highlight their matchup shop function, which is an absolute blast. In fact, we've been using it since the start of the NFL season because, let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B can get a little bit stale, a little bit boring. Well, that's not even close to being the case with the matchup shop of Overlay Fantasy, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups, and it's super simple. Just pick whichever player you think will have the higher fantasy performance. And just like a regular bet would work, check out the spreads, do your research, and then win some money. You can bet on pretty much any single sport that you want, whether it's NFL, golf, MLB, etc. All those options are there. And again, super simple. Pretty much for any single NFL game coming up, you've got a bunch of different matchups that are always updated and added to. So if it's something as simple as just putting a single submission, you can do that. But guess what? If you want to get a parlay going and double up some of those winnings, you can do that as well. So take advantage of this. All of that homework you're doing for your fantasy lineups, let's have that translate to some big time winnings for your wallet as well. So do yourself a favor and check out Overlay Fantasy's matchup shop now. Our first game of the week, we have got the Giants at the Eagles on Thursday. When looking at the wide receiver position here, let's begin with the Giants. Darius Slayton is pretty much the only Giant wide receiver I feel comfortable starting at this point in time. And you see, obviously, Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard as sits. Now, Sterling Shepard tentatively could return for this game from that turf toe injury, but I've still got him as a sit because he'll probably be limited. He'll probably be less than 100%, and I'm not a big fan of playing wide receivers, especially non-elite ones, coming off injuries. Then Golden Tate as well, and this just ties back to the fact that Daniel Jones, as of late, has struggled. The offense doesn't produce enough scoring opportunities to have multiple fantasy-relevant wide receivers, and that also brings down the touchdown upside for these guys. Darius Slayton is the preferred option there. I view him as a low-end wide receiver too. Then for the Eagles, Travis Fulgham listed as a start, probably the top fantasy wide receiver option in this matchup. He's been getting the targets, and there's plenty of injuries to the pass catchers for the Eagles. Stop us if you've heard that before. But look, tentatively Alshon Jeffrey listed as a start. We're not sure if he'll be able to suit up for this game, and that's been an issue for him, obviously, all season long. He hasn't played a single game, but if Zach Ertz, that's a huge factor in him not being available. There's going to be a lot of targets here for these other pass catchers. Maybe Deshaun Jackson suits up, Alshon Jeffrey doesn't, then obviously you can swap in Deshaun Jackson for an Alshon Jeffrey. That's a situation that has to be monitored. But right now, Travis Fulgham, the preferred option, healthy. These last 2 weeks, he's been getting the targets. He's been getting, those touchdown opportunities. So I see him as a mid-level wide receiver 2 on the week. Then Panthers at Saints. For the Panthers, I'll start Robbie Anderson. I'll start DJ Moore. And this is a much better matchup for the Panthers offense compared to last week when they faced the Chicago Bears. I think Teddy Bridgewater will have a bounce back performance. Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, I see them as mid-level wide receiver 2s. Robbie Anderson with a higher ceiling. He continues to be the preferred option for the Panthers in terms of their wide receiver 1. Keep that in mind. And then Michael Thomas for the Saints. Look, we're expecting to see Michael Thomas back. The Saints coming back from the bye week. Before that, Michael Thomas was disciplined, didn't play. And I would call it a shock at this point in time if Michael Thomas doesn't suit up. There's obviously something else going on if that's the case. But even though the Panthers secondary has been pretty good this season, Michael Thomas too good, too elite for him not to garner a bunch of targets when he returns. He is the top weapon in terms of wide receivers for Drew Brees. If for some reason he doesn't play, which again I would consider a shock, then you could put in Emmanuel Sanders as a start. But if Michael Thomas is healthy, I'm sitting Sanders because you anticipate versus this Panthers rush defense, the Saints to rely a lot on Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. So for that reason, only Michael Thomas here, but he's still a wide receiver 1. Then Bills at Jets. And boy, I love pretty much every single Bills wide receiver here. Yes, they're coming off a tough performance, but the weather was a big factor there. Not all that high scoring of affair. I think Josh Allen will have a huge game here. We'll see more so the beginning of the season, Josh Allen. Diggs is obviously the preferred option, wide receiver 1. And John Brown, I continue to say he's not that far behind from Diggs, but maybe he's still a little bit banged up. I've got him above Cole Beasley. But when you're playing the Jets defense, honestly, I feel comfortable starting all these guys. I'd probably say John Brown is a mid to low end wide receiver 2, and then Cole Beasley, high end wide receiver 3. Then for the Jets, honestly, I'm starting both the wide receivers in Crowder and Perriman because the Jets will find themselves down, I believe, fairly quickly in this contest, which means a lot of passing work for Crowder and Perriman. Crowder is the preferred option. You could call him, especially in PPR formats, probably a low-end wide receiver 1, at worst a high-end wide receiver 2. But then Brashad Perriman not far behind, and targets and volume is super important, and I think it will continue to be the case in this matchup. So I would start him probably as a low-end wide receiver 2. Moving on, we've got the Browns at the Bengals. And the big question here, obviously you see Beckham and Landry as starts because, again, I'm not all that afraid of this Bengals defense. But here, it'll more so be the status of Baker Mayfield. Will he play? Won't he? We saw that he was banged up, 2 weeks ago. They made the choice to start him versus the Steelers. He looked awful, then got pulled, after a couple quarters. So maybe his status is up in the air. But if he plays, I'll tentatively start Beckham and Landry. I think both have to be viewed as low to mid-level wide receiver 2s. In my opinion, this will be a heavy Kareem Hunt type of game versus the Bengals. And then for Cincinnati, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, A.J. Green. I continue to say that Tyler Boyd is the preferred wide receiver in this offense. Yes, coming off not the best of games, but he still gets a lot of targets. T. Higgins continues to play well. A.J. Green finally had, if you will, a breakout type of performance. His first of the season. And I think in this performance, in this game, you're going to see all 3 guys with viable opportunities, especially if Joe Mixon doesn't suit up. Expect a higher focus on the passing attack. All these guys, you could argue, are wide receiver 2s on the week. And I would say that the Cincinnati wide receivers have the higher ceiling in this contest. Next up, Cowboys at Washington. And this is a bit tougher to judge, but Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, we're listing them as starts because the sample size with Andy Dalton as the quarterback for this offense, not all that high, but obviously he looked atrocious, as did this entire offense, versus their opponent in Arizona this last week. But looking at the target standpoint, Cooper and CeeDee Lamb dominated there, and Michael Gallup was third. And we said it before, with Andy Dalton, this offense doesn't have as high of a ceiling. So for that reason, Michael Gallup, I see right now as the odd man out, and this is a tough defense in Washington, so I'm only interested in Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Again, without Dak Prescott, you have to lower their upside. They are, I believe, in the wide receiver 2 category as well. And then Washington, I'm actually really excited about Terry McLaurin. He is getting so many targets, even though, didn't translate to a huge game last week. Obviously, he's the favorite target for Kyle Allen. And I think versus this Cowboys defense, he can have a huge game. I really like him this week. Next up, Packers at Texans. I'll start Devontae Adams. Look, seeing Aaron Rodgers throw for less than 200 yards, that's not going to happen every single week. I think Devontae Adams has a big bounce back performance, especially versus this Texans defense, as does Aaron Rodgers. And then for Houston, Will Fuller is a wide receiver 1. I firmly believe that he is the preferred option for the Texans. I will fire him up here versus the Packers. And then Brendan Cooks. I don't blame you if you're selling high on Brendan Cooks at this point in time. And maybe he's a bit boom or bust, but he was getting a lot of targets this last week in that shootout versus the Titans. And I think there's going to be a lot of points scored here yet again. So Brendan Cooks, I'll still take a chance on him. I think he is a low-end wide receiver 2, but after the departure of Bill O'Brien, he's been getting a lot of opportunities, so I like him in what should be a high-scoring affair. And as far as our sits, I'll sit Randall Cobb. If you take away the touchdown he had last week, not all that great of a contest. Fuller and Brendan Cooks, that's the main offense for the Texans. So Cobb is a sit. And then same for Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think it'll be Devontae Adams and the running backs here, especially after what we saw Derrick Henry do to the Texans last week. Before continuing, I want to tell you guys a little bit about a new partner of ours in Thrive Fantasy, which is an absolutely awesome daily fantasy sports app that specializes in player props. And the great thing about Thrive Fantasy is that it's super simple to use, as they've eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. Literally, all you have to do is find a contest and join it. From there, just select the props you like and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And it's not just the NFL. There's NBA, MLB, PGA. Literally, you think it, Thrive Fantasy has it. In fact, Thrive has awarded over $1.5 million in prizes since launching in 2018 and has $50,000 guaranteed in prizes weekly. So sign up today, and when you use promo code ALLDAY on sign up, you receive an instant match bonus up to $50. You can download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store, Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. So stop waiting, sign up today, use promo code ALLDAY, and start propping up today. Next, Lions at the Falcons. I'll start Kenny Golladay and I'll start Marvin Jones. Look, neither one of these guys are big-time PPR plays, but in standard scoring leagues, they're not the worst options. Kenny Golladay, low-end wide receiver 1, and especially versus this Falcons defense, I like him. I think this will again be a high-scoring affair. Marvin Jones, yes, he didn't produce last week, but he got the targets, and I continue to say that the production will come. Low-end wide receiver 2, specifically in standard formats, probably a wide receiver 3 if you're talking PPR. And then for the Falcons, finally we had a healthy Julio Jones and a breakout Julio Jones game, and it was awesome to see. Matt Ryan was clicking. We'll see if this was short-term kind of success after the firing of Quinn, or whether it'll be a sign for things to come. But Calvin Ridley is, a safe play every single week. Both these guys, wide receiver 1s. I've got Russell Gage as a sit at this point in time. I think when Jones is healthy and when Ridley is playing the way that he is, these are the main 2 guys. You throw in some Hayden Hurst, you throw in some Todd Gurley, and just not all that many opportunities for Russell Gage. So I'd probably go ahead and sit him in this matchup. Afterwards, Steelers at the Titans. And this is where it gets a little bit tough for the Steelers. Juju Smith, I've got him as a start. But man, these last couple of weeks, he has really struggled, and that is a concern. Deontay Johnson expected to return, and if he does, this will be a very good litmus test in terms of what this offense looks with both, or I should say with all 3 wide receivers, especially the way Chase Claypool has been playing. And I'd probably say Chase Claypool right now is the wide receiver I feel most confident in starting for the Steelers. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's got the chemistry, he's got the skill. I still believe he's, arguably the best wide receiver on this team, but if he's not getting the opportunities and the volume, then, after this contest, you might see him as a potential sit candidate. I've got Deontay as a sit just because, again, a lot of mouths to feed, and coming off an injury, we'll see what happens there. And then for the Titans, mainly A.J. Brown. This is a very tough matchup versus the Steelers defense. I think you're going to see them lean on Derrick Henry. Yes, Humphries had a very nice outing this last week. We had him as a start last week, but now probably in the sit category versus this tough Steelers defense. Afterwards, Seahawks at the Cardinals. I think this will be a very high-scoring affair, at least for Seattle. I love Tyler Lockett. I love DK Metcalf. I think Lockett comes back in a big way these last couple of weeks. Not big numbers, but here versus this Cardinals defense, I expect both these guys to be wide receiver 1s. Then for Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins, I expect a big game from him here. The Seattle Seahawks secondary has been an issue all season long. I think the Cardinals can play Seattle tough. This is a divisional game. And then Christian Kirk, he doesn't get a lot of volume, but this is the type of game similar to the contest versus Dallas. I think he could get behind this defense, have that one big play. Hopkins, obviously a wide receiver 1. Kirk is a boom or bust guy, not someone I would like to play in PPR, but, similar to maybe a Marquise Brown, probably obviously less targets than that, but he does have that big play ability. I'd call him a boom or bust low-end wide receiver 2. Then Chiefs at Broncos. For Kansas City, the only wide receiver I'm interested in is Tyreek Hill. Yes, he had a tough outing this last week. It was the Travis Kelce show. But in that bad weather game, it's tough to throw the football around. So I'm not putting all that much stock into it. I think he has a bounce back game here. Then for the Broncos, Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, those have been the guys. Drew Lock back under center brings a little bit more, upside to this offense. So Patrick and Jeudy, I think you can view them as low-end wide receiver 2s, maybe mid-level wide receiver 2 for a Jeudy. Then for the sits, I'm sitting KJ Hamler. If he comes back for this game, I think Tim Patrick has really kind of distanced himself from KJ Hamler, so I think he'll be the odd man out here. Afterwards, Chargers and Jaguars. I will start DJ Chark and Keelan Cole. Yes, Chark hasn't been putting up big numbers, but the guy was an absolute target monster this last week. The opportunities will come. Trust me. I call him a mid-level wide receiver 2, maybe even high-end wide receiver 2 if he sees that same amount of targets. And then I'll also say Keelan Cole is also a start. He's been getting the opportunities. He's produced. From time to time, there will be inconsistencies. A game versus the Dolphins comes to mind. And if you throw in Laviska Shenault in there, again, it's tough. But right now, he's playing a little bit better than Laviska, getting some more looks. So I'll call him a start, but I think he's probably a high-end wide receiver 3 here. Then for the Chargers, Keenan Allen, I expect him to play. Back spasms the last time he was playing for the Chargers, then coming off the bye week. Enough time to get healthy. And I would also start Mike Williams versus this Jaguars defense. That big playability. Justin Herbert makes everyone better on this offense. Keenan Allen, I'd say in PPR formats, a low-end wide receiver 1. And then Mike Williams, probably a mid-level wide receiver 2 in standard scoring. And then like we said before, Shenault is a sit for us. 49ers at the Patriots. For the 49ers, the only wide receiver I'd really start is Deebo Samuel. He's been the guy after George Kittle getting those targets. This is still a George Kittle-centered offense along with run-heavy focus. So other than Samuel, I'm not really all that high on these other wide receivers. Then for the Patriots, honestly, it's really tempting just to put every single Patriot as a sit. Again, we're seeing that the weapons aren't ideal for New England here. And I'm not saying that Cam Newton will struggle again passing the football like he did versus Denver. But, it does leave a little bit to be desired. He's taking a lot of those rushing opportunities, which we expected. And, that's why he's got a high floor. But these wide receivers right now struggling. Damiere Byrd, N'Keal Harry, that's why you see them as sits. Kendrick Bourne, Brendan Ayuk, again, I think just not going to get enough opportunities after the rushing focus, and then Kittle and Samuel. Then Bucks at Raiders. I'll start Chris Godwin. I'll start Mike Evans. Godwin is the preferred option in PPR. He's healthy right now. I think he is, in this matchup, probably a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1. We'll see depending on how much focus Ronald Jones gets in the rushing attack. And then Mike Evans, he is a touchdown upside guy. And you saw last week the worry what could happen versus a game in the Green Bay Packers. Just doesn't get a lot of those quick throws in those type of situations. And if the Bucks go up big, Mike Evans could have a similar type of performance. I would call him a low to mid-level wide receiver 2 on the week. Then for the Raiders, Henry Ruggs, it's tough to really trust any one of these Raider wide receivers. Just so young, kind of inexperienced. I do anticipate that they're going to have to pass the football because Josh Jacobs, I don't know how much success he'll have versus this Buccaneers front. So if the Raiders find themselves down, Henry Ruggs probably has the biggest upside with that speed. But again, boomer bust type of guy, somewhat similar to a Christian Kirk. Keep that in mind, more so a play in standard formats. And then I'm sitting Hunter Renfrow. I don't see enough from him consistently. I think probably you're going to get 50 to 60 yards at most from him. And that's just not tempting enough for me to go ahead and start him. So I'll sit him here instead. Then finally, Bears at the Rams. I'll start Allen Robinson. He's the wide receiver I feel most comfortable about in this matchup. I think he's going to get enough targets to be viable. But again, it's somewhat of a tough defense here versus the Rams. So I'd probably call him a mid to high end wide receiver 2 in PPR. And then for the Rams, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, I'll list them as starts, but this is a very tough matchup versus this Bears defense, so I'm not expecting all that much here. I think both these guys are low-end wide receiver 2s. You're going to be needing a touchdown to really get a viable fantasy outing from either one of them. So with that, we wrap up this week 7 wide receiver start and sit breakdown. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other start or sit questions you might have? We will do our best to answer them. And if you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us. Check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get access to exclusive content. All those details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.